First and foremost, I want to say thank you to my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. If it wasn't for him, this would not be possible. Lord knows boxing. Hit the like button, share the video, leave a comment, subscribe. Now, you know how I carry it, right? I like talking about boxing. I like talking about historical boxing. I'm a historian. I like talking about technical boxing, fantasy matchups. I'm not really into the bochinche. There's so much Ryan Garcia, Devin Haney news coming out. The whatever it is, the ostrich, the ostrigen, the B samples, the tampered, whatever, all that. I don't care about that. My platform is designed to talk real boxing. My platform is designed to go to the gyms and talk to these fighters and get a better perspective of how they think, you know, what goes on in their world, right? But at the end of the day, Lo knows boxing, the past, the present, the future. What I want to talk about is the history, the historic history of the rivalry between Puerto Rico and Mexico in the sport of boxing. Yeah, Puerto Rico and Mexico, out of the Latino nations, have produced the most amount of champions and the biggest names out of all the Latin countries that produce great fighters in boxing. Shout out to the other countries, the other Latin nations that have produced phenomenal fighters, legendary fighters. We're talking about Panama, Roberto Duran. We're talking about Nicaragua, Alexis Arguello, Chocolatito Gonzalez. We're talking about Colombia, Antonio Kid Bombole Cervantes. We're talking about Argentina, Carlos Monzon, Juan Koji, Marcos Madonna, Sergio Martinez. We talking about Cuba, Everslandi Lara, Guillermo Rigondeaux, Kid Chocolate, Jose Napoles. In fact, Jose Napoles was half Mexican, half Afro-Cuban, right? But we're talking about the rivalry between Puerto Rico and Mexico. This is something that's been going on for a long time. And mind you, Puerto Rico is just a tiny island. But Puerto Rico for so many years has held its own with the great country of Mexico. You know, I'm talking about historical fights. This goes back a long, long time. We're talking about back when Salvador Sanchez, he took on Wilfredo Gomez, probably the biggest fight out of the Mexico-Puerto Rico rivalry. Salvador Sanchez is arguably the greatest Mexican fighter of all time. For me, he's in my top 3 greatest Mexican fighters of all time. Wilfredo Gomez, most people say he's the top of Puerto Rico. Some people say Felix Trinidad. For me, it kind of flip-flops, but I kind of lean more towards Wilfredo Gomez. They had a tremendous fight. Salvador Sanchez came out victorious and defeated Wilfredo Gomez. Before that, though, Wilfredo Gomez was building a reputation off of beating great Mexican fighters. Wilfredo Gomez took on Carlos Zarate, who at the time was, I believe, 56-0. He had 55 knockouts. Wilfredo Gomez, to my knowledge, was about maybe 30-0, 30 knockouts. Wilfredo Gomez knocked him out. That was a win for Puerto Rico, right? After Salvador Sanchez avenged Mexico by defeating Wilfredo Gomez came back and took on Guadalupe Pintor. That's probably, the greatest Mexican-Puerto Rican fight ever in terms of pure action, in terms of pure even back and forth, exchanges, skills, and Wilfredo Gomez came on to stop Guadalupe Pintor in the late rounds, right? And then, of course, Salvador Sanchez went on to defeat Juan Laporte, a great fighter from Puerto Rico, to my knowledge, that actually never became a world champion, but yet he's a phenomenal fighter. He just had some hard luck. He's been in there with some of the greatest fighters of all time, from Julio Cesar Chavez, Salvador Sanchez, Azuma Nelson. He never became a champion, Juan Laporte. But anyway, like I said, Salvador Sanchez went on to beat Juan Laporte. And then we move forward to Wilfredo Benitez. Wilfredo Benitez was 17 years old when he became a world champion at 140. He moved up to 147 and took on a world champion, a Mexican fighter, a Mexican Hall of Famer by the name of Carlos Palomino. Wilfredo Benitez defeated Carlos Palomino. So that goes down as a win for Puerto Rico over Mexico, right? But it doesn't stop there. We had so many historical fights. Edwin Rosario came on the scene and had a great fight against Jose Luis Ramirez. And then they fought again. Jose Luis Ramirez went on to beat Edwin Rosario. So that was a win for Puerto Rico and a win for Mexico. Hector Macho Camacho came on the scene, right? Hector Macho Camacho took on Bazooka Limon in Puerto Rico. And at the time, Camacho wasn't really being backed too much by the Puerto Rican fans, because even though Camacho was born in Puerto Rico, he was raised in New York, in Spanish Harlem. So they were like sort of looking at Camacho like a New York Rican. But he went to Puerto Rico nevertheless and took on a respected Mexican champion veteran in Bazooka Limon, Rafael Bazooka Limon, who was a power puncher. Hector Camacho blitzed him in about 4 rounds or 5 rounds. He stopped him in Puerto Rico. That's when the Puerto Rican fan base started really backing Hector Macho Camacho's play. It didn't stop there. Hector Macho Camacho moved up to 135 pounds lightweight and took on Jose Luis Ramirez and outclassed him over 12 rounds. So Hector Macho Camacho was starting to develop a reputation for beating Mexican fighters. And then we come with Julio Cesar Chavez. Julio Cesar Chavez was moving up the ranks. He was a former champion at 130 pounds. He moved up to 135. He moved up to 135 and he defeated Edwin Rosario, another phenomenal Puerto Rican fighter, a knockout artist, right? So that was a win for Julio Cesar Chavez. He defeated Edwin Rosario, right? Julio Cesar Chavez moved up eventually to 140 pounds, where Hector Camacho was also a champion at the time, and they took on each other in a very, very big fight. Julio Cesar Chavez defeated Hector Macho Camacho via 12-round unanimous decision. That's a win for Mexico over Puerto Rico. Julio Cesar Chavez continued to reign, right? But then the next great Puerto Rican fighter came out of nowhere from Cupe Alto, Puerto Rico, by the name of Felix Chito Trinidad. He started making a name for himself. Trinidad became a champion at the tender age of 20 years old. And his first real tough title defense against a mandatory challenger by the name of Yuri Boy Campos, who was 56-0 with 50 knockouts. Everybody was building him up as being the next Julio Cesar Chavez. Him and Felix Trinidad took on each other. He dropped Trinidad in the 4th round. Trinidad bounced back and knocked him out. He dropped Trinidad in the 2nd round, and Trinidad knocked him out in the 4th round. That's a win for Puerto Rico over Mexico, right? Trinidad went on to take on Oscar De La Hoya, who was a Mexican-American who wasn't really adopted by the Mexican hardcores. Before that fight, they backed his play. Trinidad won a controversial decision. That's 2-0 over Mexican fighters. And then he took on Fernando Vargas. He knocked out Fernando Vargas in a phenomenal fight, 12th round. Trinidad was 3-0 against Mexicans. Trinidad might be the most successful Puerto Rican fighter during the Puerto Rico versus Mexico rivalry. Fast forward, then we had Juan Manuel Lopez. Juanma bursted upon the scene from Puerto Rico. He fought a Mexican champion by the name of Daniel Ponce de Leon. He knocked him out in 1 round, right? A win for Puerto Rico over Mexico. And then Juanma Lopez eventually took on the brother of Juan Manuel Marquez, and Rafael Marquez. He defeated him in a tough fight. He made him quit on his stool. But then he took on Orlando Salido. Orlando Salido went to Puerto Rico and knocked out Juanma Lopez. And from that point on, the rivalry between Puerto Rico and Mexico started to go from sort of like even to more one-sided, because he knocked him out twice in Mexico, and then from that point on, the Mexican fighters were beating the Puerto Rican fighters in the rivalry. You know, there was a smaller Puerto Rican champion by the name of Ivan Calderon, Iron Boy, a very skilled fighter. He took on a Mexican fighter. Pardon me for not remembering the name of the fighter, because I'm not really too familiar with some of the smaller weight names, some of them. But he got beat twice in Puerto Rico, right? And then Miguel Cotto took on Antonio Margarito. That was probably top 5, one of the biggest Puerto Rico-Mexico matchups in a long time. Top 5, right? Along with Chavez, Camacho, Trinidad, Vargas, Gomez, Salvador Sanchez. You know what I mean? That was a very big fight. And Antonio Margarito stopped Miguel Cotto in the 11th round. Now, that fight was controversial at the end of the day, because it was later found out that Margarito was trying to cheat going into the Shane Mosley fight. So there's a lot of speculation if he's been doing that for a long time prior to the Shane Mosley fight. But Miguel Cotto redeemed himself, had a rematch, defeated Margarito, stopped him, right? So that's a win for Puerto Rico and a win for Mexico. But then Mexico continued to dominate Puerto Rican fighters. There was a world champion by the name of Alberto Machado. He took on an unknown Mexican fighter. I forgot his name, but I know he was a construction worker. He knocked out Machado twice. Felix Verdejo was a Puerto Rican fighter who was a blue chip Olympic silver medalist, if I'm not correct. He was on a rise, and then he got beat by a Mexican fighter, right? He got stopped. He fell off the map. And then so many one-sided rivalry fights between Mexico and Puerto Rico continued. You had Pedufo, Christopher Diaz taking on Navarrete. Navarrete stopped him. The only fights between Puerto Rican fighters and Mexico fighters where Puerto Rican fighters were winning were the fights where there was a Puerto Rican American fighter against a Mexican fighter. For example, Danny Garcia was very successful against Mexican fighters. In fact, he was undefeated in the Mexico-Puerto Rico / Puerto Rican / Philly Rican fights. He defeated Eric Morales. He defeated Robert Guerrero. He defeated Brandon Rios. He defeated Jose Benavidez, right? And then you had Shakur Stevenson. Shakur Stevenson is a Puerto Rican / African American fighter, but nevertheless, when he fights Mexican fighters, it's Puerto Rico versus Mexico / New Jersey Rican. Shakur Stevenson defeated Oscar Valdez, right? He defeated Joel Gonzalez, and he defeated another Mexican, if I'm not correct. Or 2 Mexicans right there, right? But other than that, the Mexicans have been dominating the Puerto Rican fighters. Miguel Cotto took on Canelo Alvarez. Canelo Alvarez won that fight. Let's fast forward right now. Puerto Rico's been on a slump for a long time as far as producing elite fighters from the island of Puerto Rico. But right now, we got a certified killer by the name of Subriel Matias. Subriel Matias has a tough fight against Liam Parrell. We got to see how good he is, because Liam Parrell is a very tough, formidable foe who's coming off of stopping a highly talented Montana Love. Subriel Matias, if he can get himself a Puerto Rico-Mexico rivalry type of matchup against someone like Isaac Pitbull Cruz and come out victorious, that will be one of the biggest wins for Puerto Rico over Mexico in the rivalry. Puerto Rico has to start producing more elite fighters in order for this rivalry to become competitive like it was back in the day. Because as of right now, the rivalry is not competitive. But I have faith that Puerto Rico will start developing great fighters. They will, because that's how it is. And we got Canelo Alvarez potentially, eventually, facing off against Edgar Berlanga. This is going to be hyped up as a Puerto Rico versus Mexico rivalry matchup. But to me, not really, because all due respect, Edgar Berlanga is not on the level of a Canelo Alvarez. Edgar Berlanga has not defeated anyone in the top 10 in his weight class. in order for him to be considered as a Mexico-Puerto Rico rivalry with Canelo Alvarez. Canelo had his rivalry match against Miguel Cotto. It's going to be very interesting to see what's in store for the legendary rivalry between Puerto Rico and Mexico. I just wanted to share some boxing history with y'all. So with that being said, hit the like button, share the video, leave a comment, and subscribe. Low Nose Boxing, because Low Nose Boxing. I'm out.